I remember days they used to laugh at me. Used to show them on my records talking casually. Used to say it was a passion on my path to be. Then they told me that I couldn't, so I had to be. Tell me what they really think about it now. Used to hate it, but I guarantee they're proud. Had to do it just to show them that I could, yeah. Now I finally think I took it where I should, yeah. Had a jokes on you and now you're on and laughing. I did a whole lot of winning. Look, it came from a passion. I see a whole lot of no ones I could see now in public. And that may think a lot of things, man. At least think something, now you the judge. Hey, now tell me where you ended up. Yeah. Look, I bet it was a simple job. Yeah. Look, I went and took a different route. Yeah. Look, that's why my life is different now. Back in my feelings, look, when I wasn't so gifted and I was learning to do this, and all I heard were the critics, and I don't blame you for that shit. Look, I was way out the basis, but I just needed some talent so I could wait this to greatness. Oh yeah, you ain't ever think this, no, no, no. Stop me while I started, homie, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now this shit settled, it's go better and better, but I'll always remember, yeah, yeah.
David Heacock, what's happening, man? Welcome to That One podcast, man. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Where are you rocking out of right now? Like West Palm, right?
West Palm Beach, Florida.
West
where
Palm.
It's 80 degrees and sunny.
Yeah, and the wintertime was good this year? Did you guys?
Oh, it's perfect. The last couple of months have been absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. Well, look, I appreciate you working with us at That One, and I love what you're getting ready to do. You've had a lot of success in business, which we're going to talk about here, but now you're taking it on the road, so to speak, and going out there to the world and helping people. And I want to really find out and dig what's behind that too, because there's a reason and purpose behind that. But let's talk about first. Where did you grow up? Where did this all start? David Heacock's story start.
I'm from Talladega, Alabama, a town of about 12,000 people, and it's actually where Filterbuy, my company's headquarters, currently is. And
did you go to races when you were growing up?
I went to many races growing up. I actually was fortunate because it's a small town, so we knew who the president of the speedway was. So we got to go behind the scenes a lot of the races. And the year before Dale Earnhardt Sr. died, I actually got to have dinner with him and a few other people in Talladega at the race. And then he tragically died the year after. But had a lot of race experiences early on in my life.
That's awesome. I didn't until I got older, and I always lived near Dover, Delaware. The Monster Mile, they call it. And I went to my first race and I took my son with me and I was blown away, man. The speed, and it's not even a super speedway. I think Talladega is a super speedway, right?
Talladega is the original, I think, super speedway.
Yeah. And it was not even as fast, but still I was blown away. I'm like, now I see all these rednecks why they like this, and I love country music. I've been called redneck, so I figured might as well go to a race. So that's awesome. And then did you get into the family business at a young age or?
Well, no. So I grew up with the family business that was primarily in the textile industry, and I saw it get decimated in the 90s as all of that with NAFTA and everything it kind of put out. And I was in a mission to get as far away from home as possible, and I actually moved to New York City and went to work for Goldman Sachs, where I ultimately ran the emerging market options trading business. But when I was 29 years old, my family was going through the sale of what was left of the family business, which was like basically servicing the wood products industry, sawmills and that kind of stuff. And my grandfather, who was still living in his early 90s, really did not want to see it leave the family. And I kind of decided on a whim to quit my job and buy this dying industrial supply business in Talladega, Alabama, and really had no idea what I was going to do with it. But I started looking around for a product that I could manufacture in Alabama competitively and sell direct to consumer, because the direct to consumer movement was really big at the time. And to me, that meant like if you could manufacture something and actually sell it to an end user, you would have a direct to consumer kind of competitive advantage. And I kind of whittled it down to remanufacture ink cartridges or pleated air filters, because they both have kind of certain dynamics, and ultimately settled on pleated air filters because they're so bulky, have so much variation, and would be logistically expensive to import from China or some other place. And so I thought I could build a kind of sustainable competitive edge with that, and I've kind of been working on that ever since.
And your experience at Goldman Sachs, did it help you with this, besides the finance part, but understanding how all that worked? Was there Some things you
Well,
took from that?
the finance part, like I was an options trader, so it's very different than traditional business financing. I mean, it's not really applicable in any way, shape, or form. But the experience that really did help me, and that I think has been invaluable to me, is I was a manager of risk, right? I mean, that's what an
Mhm.
option trader is like basically your clients are always asking you to take the other side of trades that they don't want by definition. So like you get very good at being put in kind of tough situations and having to get creative to manage that risk and get out of it. And part of that is making decisions very quickly, owning those decisions, and then figuring out how to maneuver once you get put in that position. And that's really what business and life is about. And I got a PhD in that in a very short time frame, because when you're in the trading world, everything is very quick. Whereas in the business world, it seems a lot slower. But I was able to train a lot of those muscles that I think really served me well when I got into business for myself.
Yeah, well, talking about, I mean, that risk has to do with cash flow management. And when you're in business, cash flow, especially when you're starting out, what you didn't even know what you were going to do with it. I mean, most people have a business, they have an idea what they're going to do. Like you knew, you had a general idea that you're going to figure out something, but there's cash flow management when you first start out that has to do with risk.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that you're on the right thing. Like too many people in the entrepreneurship space don't talk about cash flow and the importance of cash flow management. Which as sounds like cash flow is oxygen, right? When you're in a business, and I've always been hyper aware of that. I mean, and I think that like. Some people like look at decisions I make and how I've built the business, and they say, "Oh, that looks very risky." And the reality is that I'm actually very risk averse. So like I'm big on taking like massive action, but always keeping my risk low, or like knowing that I'm always going to be able to survive, right? And so like I basically have bootstrapped this business with effectively zero debt, but constantly kind of pushing the envelope on what I'm able to do. So I keep my risk relatively low, but I keep my actions high, and I make lots of bets that that any which one of them is not going to put me out of business,
Right.
but they compound into big wins over a long period of time. But cash flow management is the thing that I think is the downfall of most small businesses today, and something that does not get enough talk about in the kind of guru community.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking of that, watching all the stuff, you haven't been online as much until what, October, you said, right? Digitally, like having a digital footprint. So you said, and have you watched other influencers prior to that? And were you online looking at other people and seeing what they're saying and all these business gurus? And
Yeah, I mean, I definitely studied it for a couple of years before I entered into the game. I mean, like the online space, as you well know, is undeniably, where the action is now. And there's generally when smart people are doing things, you want to study it and understand why. And so I saw all these people that were, pontificating on the internet, and you say, well, like, what is their motivation? Why are they doing this? What's in it for them? And I really, I think there's a lot of bad information that's put on the internet. There's a lot of like incentives that are hidden behind a lot of the content that people put out. And part of my motivation for doing this is, I bootstrapped this business. I'm now 42 years old, and I kind of think, well, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? Well, I want to do some version of what I'm doing now for the rest of my life. I want to build a long-term legacy business, and the only way that I'm going to be able to do that, if I want to continue to really grow and do bigger and bigger things, is to have other like-minded people that want to come on that journey with me, whether that be through partnerships or acquisitions or employees, all of those stakeholders that are so important if you want to build a much larger vision. And so, my idea and my reasoning for starting to go so public is to give people an alternative path to the maybe flashy guru type entrepreneur that is very short-term thinking. Like I'm a very long-term focused, long-term thinker. And my hope is that over time, I will attract other long-term thinkers to come along with me on that journey. And that is the motivation for me starting this whole process.
yeah, I love it. All right. So let me dive into the bootstrapping. Was there any revenue at all when you bought the business?
So it was like a $10 million a year industrial supply business that had like $300,000 a year of net margin in the end. So it was a very low margin um, um, industrial supply business that was decaying year after year. The average salesperson was in their 60s and it was relying on kind of legacy relationships. So I had that as my starting point, which I actually would not recommend because like having to kind of maneuver that while starting something new is definitely a high level trick. But that was basically the starting point that I had when I bought it.
And when you say bootstrap, you didn't raise capital at all.
No, I put all I basically put all the money I had, which was probably about $800,000 or something of cash into the business and borrowed the rest of the money from a bank, which I think it was like $2 million all in that I when I bought that business.
Now, looking back, do you think that you would have preferred to raise capital or do what you did?
I think that's a great question, and I think for most people going the capital raise approach is rational. So I definitely don't want to discourage people from that. I think that it's not an irrational approach. For me, I'm super independent, and I don't want to answer to anybody, including a bank, at the end of the day. And so for me and for my personality, having that independence has been very important. So it's for me that's extremely important. But I think for most people, you know, the advice that I always give is that you need to have at least 2 years of runway on your business idea before you get started. And I think a lot of times people run out of capital too quickly. And so maybe they're onto a good idea, but they don't have the staying power. And for a lot of people, that's not realistic unless you go out and you raise some capital. So, I think I would much rather see somebody raise capital and get themselves the staying power to be able to make something successful than go in and not have enough capital to be able to have the staying power to actually see if it's a good idea or not. And I think that's a trap a lot of people get into. So I would just be that would be kind of my advice. But everybody's different, and you got to kind of have to follow your own path.
See, I like to always pretend I'm broke when I'm not. Now, not with being free to invest, right? Not with having to like understanding money needs to flow and all that. I'm not talking about that. But every morning I wake up, I don't want to feel comfortable or complacent. So raising capital is not thing for me. I like to go out and sell, build revenue, build relationships, get a pipeline going, and then add to the pipeline constantly and make sure that there's no gaps in the pipeline. Talk about, if you don't mind, the raising capital versus bootstrapping, right? The mental side of it for you. Because for me, like I said, I could have millions of dollars in the bank and still wake up every morning pretending it's not there. Knowing it's there, in the back of my mind, but I just like to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm built the exact same way. So I very much resonate with that. That's how I feel like every day. I've got a very healthy, substantial cash flow positive business, but every day I wake up, thinking, okay, I've got to outrun whoever's behind me, right? I mean, and it's like whatever threat, might be coming my way. So like I wake up with that kind of, bias to action every single day. And I think that's really important if you want to build and you want to grow something meaningful. I think you have there's really no other option. You got to burn the boats as I talk about it. And I think burning the boats is extremely important. And, that's one advantage when you're bootstrapped is you have effectively burned the boats because you have no backup plan. But I mean, I just think that not everybody's built that way, I think, right? I mean, that's why self-awareness is just so important. I mean, you're built that way, I'm built that way. And I think a lot of successful entrepreneurs are built that way, but that's not the only path. And people just have to be self-aware about what really drives them. But I do think that oftentimes, having constraints is really a superpower. And that's why you see all these companies that raise a ton of money that don't have any constraints, and then they end up going bankrupt. I've seen that happen so many times, and you're like, how in the world did that happen? Because it doesn't seem logical, but it's because they didn't have those constraints, and so they don't build the good habits that you build when you do have constraints, or they don't get as creative as you have to get when you have those constraints. And I think that is definitely an important driver. And I use that in the same way. It sounds like like you use it, in that, I don't want to give myself that, I don't want to get complacent and to get lazy, which if you just think of yourself as having all this money or having all these resources, that oftentimes leads to complacency and laziness, and that can be very detrimental.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you see people like Elon, he says he works, he goes to bed, he wakes up, he works, he goes to bed, he works. But then there's other people that have made it, quote unquote, they have enough money, let's say, and they don't operate that way. So I guess it is a personality thing. There's different personalities out there.
Well, it's also a mission thing. I mean, it's why, like, I think you have to know your why, and I think that's kind of your thing. But you have to know like what you're working for and what your purpose is in life. I mean, and I'm committed to holding this craft for the rest of my life. I mean, and that's extremely important to me. And I want to wake up every day and get better at it, or work to get better at my craft. And I've devoted my life to it. And I think that that's really what it takes to do something really big. I mean, and Elon is like the example of someone who is very mission driven. He has his mission of going to Mars and making the species interplanetary or whatever. And, that drives every decision he does. I mean, and I think that, that is an example of an extreme forcing mechanism. When you're out there crafting your life, you got to say like, well, what am I working towards? Like, what is my why? Why am I waking up every single day and going so hard? And I think that people need to find that for themselves. And I feel very fortunate to have found it for me.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the word intention for a second. So I was having a drive. We were going for a ride with my wife last night. I was coming back from where we were. And I said, what's funny is that whatever people set their intentions on, they get. And most people setting their intentions on just getting by to pay the bills to get to the next month, next week, whatever it is. And they get that. But they don't realize that they're intentionally setting an intention to do that and getting what you set your intention on. So every time I've set an intention on something, I've gotten it. And so I'm always thinking to myself, let me see how far I can take this thing. Let me see how far this set an intention really works. And I'm always concerned, am I setting the intention high enough for my potential? What's really available here? And so can you talk about like your experience with setting intention and seeing the results behind that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of my favorite subjects, actually. I mean, I say it often, but people consistently overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. And I've lived that, firsthand. When I first started this journey in 2012, I actually I kind of wrote down my intentions and my business, just long-term plan, like not sure how I was going to get there, but kind of long-term planning. And I said, 10 years from now, I want to have a $70 million a year business with, I don't know, $7 million of earnings. And that was like what I was kind of working towards from a financial perspective.
So wait a minute, not to cut you off, but that's about roughly 33% margin, give or take, right? Is what you were thinking?
I'm saying 10% net margin on
net margin.
Like
okay.
I said, $70 million. I was going to have a $70 million of revenue with 10%, with 10%. I think that was what I wrote down.
Okay.
As like my, just goal, basically starting with nothing, saying like, hey, I'm going to figure out a way to make that happen in 10 years. Which seemed crazy.
That's what I was going to ask you next.
Like anybody that I told it to, like I remember telling it to my dad or telling it to other people, they're like, oh yeah, whatever, like that sounds great, good goal, whatever. Fast forward 10 years, I'd done triple that. And
wait a minute. So that was 2012 when you started or got the business, and you said by 2022, 3 years ago, give or take, you were going to be at 70 million, and you ended up doing 200 some million.
Correct.
So hold on here. So when you were saying 70, you're telling people now. Obviously, other people, they reflect upon their own beliefs of what they could accomplish, and then they distribute it to you, and then you can take that and say, "I'll show you," or you can say, "Yeah, maybe I can't do that." Right? You're the type of person, I'll show you.
Correct, 100%. Yeah, I mean, that is fuel for me because like anybody around me at that time would have said that just sounded crazy. I mean, it just seems like, impossible. I mean, keeping in mind, I was starting a air filter manufacturer from scratch with no experience in the air filtration industry, right?
Yeah.
Zero. Never been in an air filter manufacturing plant in my life. And I said, I'm going to do this in the next 10 years. So everybody around me thought it was crazy, but I have, written evidence like I like that was my plan. And, I've done 3 times that. And, we kind of talked earlier about, why I'm doing starting to go public and raising my mission, well, it's because I realized I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to go. I'm going to aim much bigger next time. And this is me burning the boat, saying, "Hey, I'm going out and telling everybody, telling the world what I'm out there intending to do, building the world's leading indoor air quality company, and telling people how I'm going to do it, and putting it publicly on the internet for everybody to see and to witness, because I'm burning all the boats. I'm not giving myself any other option, right? But it's all because, I realized I thought I was aiming big, at that time with that 10-year vision, and I did not realize just how small I was aiming. I wish I had a much bigger vision, but I probably would be much further along.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, to think about that, like when I write my stuff down, I'm like, how in the heck? But the problem is that people want to focus on the how first, but you should commit first. You got to commit. Then the how comes. If you learned the how before you committed, you would never commit because it's like, it would seem too overwhelming. You agree with that?
Correct.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, and I think that, kind of to close the circle on what you earlier said, we all become what we focus on. And if you're going to focus on that scarcity or focus on, the things that you don't have in your life, then that's what you're going to get. But if you really focus on where you're going, which is why I encourage people to have that long-term vision, if you focus on that, that becomes your forcing mechanism, because every micro step that you take, you're going to be asking yourself, is this closer? Is this consistent with my vision or not? And then magically what you're going to see is you start inching along that path, because you're going to see all the things that connect those dots, because that's what you're focusing on. But if you're focusing on all the scarcity in your life, then you're going to forever be stuck in that scarcity.
Yep. I love it. Yep. All right. So I've had some of the best mentors I could ever have asked for. I don't know where they came from. I set an intention and they showed up. And one of the things that they talked about a lot was in general is to understand documenting the process, right? Now, you documented your process, I'm sure, because you created systems and process and set up your operations, set up your culture, right? But do you wish that you would have documented I don't know, you may have, but maybe even like wrote down or filmed from the beginning and documented the process versus doing it now where you're going back and like reflecting upon it?
I wish I had filmed the whole thing, because like a lot of this stuff doesn't even sound believable to me sometimes when I say it, when I know what the lived experience was. And so now I'm here telling that story in retrospect, and a lot of times people don't believe it because they're like, oh, that sounds impossible, and so, I absolutely wish I had documented it. But I'm not making that mistake now. Now I'm documenting everything and putting it out publicly for everybody to witness. I think that, early entrepreneurs, and I was definitely fell to this, like we're kind of afraid of, spilling the secret sauce or spilling the beans about what we're doing, because we think that that's going to bring on competition, or people are going to make fun of us, or whatever it is. And I think that the reality is that that's just not the case. I mean, I think that people are so focused on themselves that you really should worry less about what other people think, because people are not paying near as much attention to you as you think that they are.
Yeah. So you like the idea of collaboration, serving, sharing now versus worrying about competition?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's additive, and it ends up bringing what you put out to the world is what you get back. It's the same way when you set intention, you're going to get that back in your life. Like the kind of energy that you put out to the world, you're going to get it back. And that's why, sharing and serving as much as you possibly can, I think is an important factor in that. I mean, and that's why I'm out here doing it. I want to share a number of the mistakes and lessons that I've made, so that hopefully other people don't. And I think that puts out good karma to the world. But ultimately, I hope to find other like-minded people that I can partner with and do business with in the future, that are going to help me to meet my long-term vision and long-term goals.
Yeah. And then the other thing from my mentors they talked about is proximity and assessment lead to elevation. All right. So I want to talk about assessment first. Obviously, looking at your numbers and all that, and KPIs is important, but I'm talking about personally right now for you. How often do you assess yourself personally with your thoughts, words, actions, and the environment that you're keeping?
Every Sunday. I call it my Sunday success service. We kind of coined that in processes we're talking about. But, every Sunday I spend a couple of hours like really reflecting on my previous week, and planning for my next week. All in the context of my bigger vision, where I do like longer term planning at least once a year. But for me, I think that self reflection, and check in every single week is absolutely critical, and it allows me to kind of reset and bring intention to my actions over the coming week.
Yeah, yeah. So I do it. I don't write it down every day, but every night before I go to bed, I think about how are my thoughts, how are my words, how are my actions, and who's around me. Because people around you can hold you back, and most people aren't willing to confront that when they need to. But every day, every morning, I want to be able to quickly fix it as quickly as possible. I want to confront as fast as possible, and all aspects. So I go through this thing every night, and I think about it, because all those things, thoughts, words, actions, and your environment, have to align with that long-term vision you're talking about. And if they're not, you got to get rid of it as quickly as possible. And then I think about liabilities and assets, not in financial space. I do, obviously, but not when I'm referring to this. Liabilities and assets. Who's a liability? Who's an asset? My thoughts. And all through those four areas, thinking about liabilities and assets, and getting the most assets I could possibly, and get rid of the liabilities. And just like you're talking about when you're talking about finances and dealing with the banks or somebody that's investing in your company, that's a liability, on the books. So
Yeah, certainly can be.
Yeah. So anyway,
Yeah,
I'm thinking about that.
but like, you're training yourself over time to focus on what matters. I mean, and to eliminate what's not. I mean, and the only way, like, that doesn't come naturally to people. The only way that you do that is through practice and consistency. Which, by doing that every night, you're exhibiting that consistency, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we all build those muscles to do it.
Yeah. Now, proximity. Let's talk about proximity for a second. So what is your intention with being in proximity to people that can help you, and also people that are further along than you, despite the success you've had? How much emphasis do you put on being around people that are further along than you?
I'll say historically, it's not something I've done a great job of, to be honest with you. I would say that most of my mentors are, what I would call virtual mentors through books and reading. Like, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are the two most formative people in my life and in my thinking. And if I were to kind of walk through like my whole business decisions and logic, is very much formed by them and what I have learned through that. And so for me, being a student and a student of history and a student of business and anything entrepreneurial related, has really served me and served my purpose well. But a big motivation for me, starting to go public with this, is I basically spent 12 years building building my own unique business in silence and on my own without that. And I do think that to really level up and go to the level that I intend to go is going to be more and more important. And that's part of the reason I'm putting myself out there in the way that I am.
Yeah, well, mentorship from afar is what I call it, what you did with Warren Buffett and Munger. I believe in that a lot, because all my mentors came from me studying for them from afar. They had no idea that what I was getting from them. And then when I got to meet them, I basically told them what things that they taught me. And then I was able to, and by the way, when I learn things, David, I don't know about you, but I learn things and I don't think about the future right away. I think about, okay, what did I have failures in the past with, and what did I have successes with? Based on what I'm learning, this is trying to attach what I learned to the failures and to the successes, so that I could really lean into the successes and the principles that led me there, and not run away, but like eliminate the things that led to the failures and take lessons from those. So yeah, I love the mentorship from afar, 100%. All right. So then I also want to touch on the health thing. Okay. Now you get money. Okay. And obviously not everybody focuses on health early on. They're focusing on their success, their financial success, their business success. When you start to get money and you start to have enough money that you got everything you need, and you get some kind of stability, then your focus has to shift to health, because you want to last, right? So has that been, when did thinking about health, optimization, longevity, when does that come into play for you?
September 2021, right after COVID. COVID was a very kind of tough time. Like, we grew a lot, but I was traveling every single week, and it was it was a very it was a nutty time in my life. And basically September 2021, now the business was in a good place. We had kind of gotten through the bump and really were able to harness it. And I'd done a lot of crazy things and moved down to West Palm, and I hired my trainer, and he likes to tell this story. I called him and said, I want to have a 7-day a week program. You travel with me if I travel, and I'm gonna go all in on this because it's really important to me. And he kind of laughed at me. He said, well, I only work 5 days a week, but for you, I'll make an exception to do it 6, but no way I'm going to do 7. And he told me later that he thought there was zero chance I was actually going to stick with it. Flash forward to today, he and I still work out 6 days a week together,
Awesome.
basically no matter what I'm doing. So 6 days a week at 6:30, I set that in with him, and that's been, I'm gradually leveling it up and doing more and more with it. I'm actually training for a high rocks right now.
What is that? What is it?
A high rocks race.
What
It's
is that?
kind of like a lesser version of CrossFit. I think it's 8 kilometers of running, but it's like you run and then you do 100 wall balls, and then you run a
Gotcha.
kilometer, and then you do a 1,000-meter row, and it's like
Yeah.
8 different
Okay.
exercises. It's not as hard on your body. I'm in my 40s, so CrossFit and stuff is too hard on your body, at least for me.
Oh,
But
bullshit,
it's just
David.
a way.
That's a belief. That's just a
Well,
belief, man.
but there's some that you have. That I'm willing to put in the work, but I'm playing for
I'm messing with you.
longevity. I mean,
Yeah.
and I don't want to beat up my body.
I
If I
know.
could actually, if you listen to a T or these guys, like not getting injured as you get older is one of the most important things. And so you at all costs, you basically need to avoid getting injured. Because imagine not being able to work out for 3 months or whatever it is, and just how bad that is on your body. So I do think it's important to do things that are not likely to injure you.
Yeah.
But I'm not naturally athletic.
By the way, I'm 48. I just want I still, but 100%. I always am cautious of injury. I don't want to be, laid up for any time. No, I was just busting your chops a little bit. How about the diet though, nutrition part, and also the blood work and testosterone, like looking at hormones and panels and things like that to optimize? Have you looked into any of that yet?
Yeah, I actually have a longevity doctor that I work with in New York, that I've been optimizing that kind of stuff with. I'm lucky. I'm naturally very healthy in most of those ways. Um, but I have in fact lost about 40 pounds since that
Oh,
2021.
congratulations.
And I'm still optimizing diet and this kind of stuff. I do track all my macros, and I kind of am spoiled in that I have somebody that cooks for us and basically makes all my meals, and all my macros are counted out. And so I've gotten pretty dialed in on it. I still am tweaking, and I definitely kind of genetically, like you seem like you look pretty genetically gifted. I'm not as genetically gifted as you, but
No, I just put a lot of work in,
but
David. I put a lot of work in. Trust me.
I feel like I do too, but it's all I
Yeah.
guess it's all relative.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I really have focused on that the last few years, but the way I justify it is I want to be in this game for the as long as possible. And if you listen to Warren Buffett, or like, he would tell you that his biggest advantage is that he lived as long as he did, right? I mean, he made most of his money after the age of 55. If you
Mhm.
look at his equity chart, and so part of it is just playing the long game. If you want to play the long game, you need to be healthy. And so it's definitely something that I have started to prioritize in a major way and built my life around. But kind of to your earlier point, I would just caution people, like, that is not what has made me successful. And I think that people need to understand that is, like, when people say their morning routines or they talk about all this stuff, that is not the thing that made these people successful. It's what helps them to maintain balance and success, I think, later on, as you figure out how to dial in and to get these good habits. But it's not the thing that got me to this point.
No,
And I think you have to
100%.
take the two. Yeah.
I made a lot of money being fat, and I have a buddy that was 300 some pounds, and he crushed it business wise, but he wasn't healthy. But so yeah, I 100% agree with you. But you see all these things like you gotta be on your more team 4 o'clock in the morning and write your goals down, do all this stuff, and it helps. It's optimization. You know what I relate it to? You know, golfers go to a coach and then they'll go to do these things to shave off 1 or 2 strokes, right, of their game. It's not to overhaul the game. It's not why they were good at golf. It put them to the next level and then lasting longer, like you said. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it definitely helps with energy and stability. And like for me, it's just as important for my mental game as it is my physical game. Like if I take a couple days off now, like it's hard for me, and I miss it because I miss it mentally more than anything.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're up against the clock here, so I want to cover one more thing and then we'll wrap up here. Challenges. What challenges in your business right now are you facing? And like, what do you wake up thinking about or go to bed thinking about? And the fact of the matter is, some people would say, well, when it gets stable, like, I don't have anything right now. Or if you don't have challenges that you're thinking about, are you really setting the bar high enough?
No, I've always got challenges. Some you can talk about more than others as part of the problem. But like the reality is that when you're scaling at the level that we are and that I intend to continue to do, it's always related to people. I mean, like the people are the most important part of any business or organization, and the bigger you get, the more important the more that becomes true. And you know, I've really spent the last few years leveling up my management team, and I'm very excited about that to be able to position myself for it. But constantly, you know, figuring out how to optimize that, make sure people are, you know, in the right seats, that you have the right people in the right seats, and that you're recruiting the right type of talent and people are aligned. You know, that is where I spend a lot of my time and energy now. And it's definitely the thing that dominates my thoughts. And, you know, almost all problems come down to people and process, and making sure that you have those things right. And so as the CEO, I always am dealing with the parts of our organization or our system where that is broken, and there's inevitably going to be a part within an organization of our size where that is broken, and it's my responsibility to get in there and to correct it. And so that's what dominates my thoughts at a macro level, at least.
I got it. I've been there. You know, automation, AI has taken me out of the people game as much. I was in the people a lot in the mortgage and real estate. It was huge, hundreds of employees. Now it's not as we can do a lot with automation and AI now that we don't need the people. But I still remember those days, building culture, alignment, you know, all that stuff. And I'm looking forward to building further with that. But all right, so where can people go to go deeper with you, David? Where do you want to send them?
I'm David Filterbuy on all platforms. We put out a long form YouTube every week. I think on Saturdays at David Filterbuy, but David Filterbuy on Instagram or X, wherever there's a platform, I'm David Filterbuy.
All right, guys, and get ready because he's getting ready to pump out massive amounts of great content. I'm excited to watch and learn from you, David. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you trusting in that one, and looking forward to building together. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, guys, this has been That One Podcast with your boys C-Roc and David Heacock. Make sure you go subscribe. Go check out his Instagram, David Filterbuy, and tell your friends, family, coworkers about us and the guests. And until next time, be that one.